Okay, guys, so welcome back. Uh, Today we are back to talk about, well, we could really talk about anything, but today we're going to talk about how to restore tools the old time way and what that means and why we're going to do it that way. And so for me, the old time way is the way the old timers used to do it, which is the simplest method that you can possibly come up with the least number of tools and things wasted and all those kinds of things. Because in the old days, you didn't have time to waste things, you didn't have extra of things to waste. And you certainly couldn't like afford to make messes everywhere and then not clean them up, or if you did, then you lived in your mess. And so we're going to try to avoid all those things. We're going to try to do it easy on ourselves and nature and the environment and each other and all the other things. Like, I'm going to try to show you guys like how you can fix something, how you can take something that's old and like at the end of its life, you know what I mean, and turn it into something new again. um we could have like it's there's many ways that you can get on that path of the way, right? It's like we could have done this, you know, we could have been talking about the phoenix rising from the ashes and all the other stuff that goes along with that type of motif, but we're going to do it this way today. And so in front of us we have some hammers. They're vintage, most of them, older than I am probably. um, and each of them needs a new handle for one reason or another. I'm going to go through each of them, why they need a new handle, and what it is that we can do maybe to save them and preserve them. Because I want to turn them into something that we can actually use for the channel. You know, these I want these to be our users, so that it's like kind of brother and sister, or brother and brother, and moms and pops. You know, which one's which? You guys will have to tell me. All right, that's the way that one's gonna work. But I already did kind of go over these in our introduction episode, but just for posterity, I'm gonna go over them one more time. So we have the first one, which I think is like the nicest as far as the ball peen hammers that I've ever seen or picked up at a thrift shop. $10, you know, not bad. It's got a little bit of dings and stuff, but for me, those are war wounds, right? It's not going to do anything to the function of the hammer, so we'll leave some of those kinds of things in because it gives it character, right? But I don't know. Should we clean up the paint? We might clean up the paint, or we might like retouch up the paint, you know, make everything else shiny because it should deserves to be shiny again when we're using it, right? But it's got some problems. Whoever the last owner was thought that that was a good way to secure the handle, and it is secure. We'll say that it's secure, but just man, that's not pretty, and we could definitely do better than that. And also on the back of it, like the way that that's sitting with the split there, and just like that wants to go places, and it shouldn't want to go places. It should be like further seated down, and it's not really like the best shape of a handle up there either. Like if you hit that on something, like overstrike, like you're just gonna crack that like nothing, man. So it's just an accident waiting to happen. So for all of those reasons, needs a new handle. Um, could we? Could we? This handle is long, right? We could probably cut the handle off somewhere about, you know, in this area and make a short handle. So that's an option that we might consider, especially with this one, because like the handle is actually in like really decent condition down here, so we could do that. But what we'll do is we'll just cut it off, and we'll save the handles. I always try to save them, so then if I need to trace around one, I need that shape, right? I still have the shape. I can hold on to it and have it extra. You know what I mean? And they also make little good things to bonk things with, but you know, don't tell anybody. You know. Oh god. But yeah, so brother, sister, right? We'll call her big sister because she's slightly bigger on the face and in the cheeks, but she's kind of a beauty too, right? Like those are nice. They're nice. They're like friends, best friends together, right? So uh sometimes you need one that you're holding, right? And then one that you're hitting with. So that's why sometimes you need pairs of things, or you need one on one side and one on the other of something, right? When you're trying to shape something. So that's why we're gonna do two, and they're gonna be best friends. Now we have moms and pops. For me, it's kind of like this is mom, this is pops, but this is because this is mom's granddad, and this is pops's grandfather. You know what I mean? Like that's how that feels to me. These two, right? And let me go back actually, because we're supposed to do the handle. This is the one that's all chewed up, and it's got a nail and like all kinds of stuff in there, gunk. You know, who the hell knows what the hell's going on in there? It looks like it's rotting out. So we can also similarly try to do a short handle off this one. Uh, the chief would be telling me right now that I should give it a shot, but it's like which one do you make the big sister or the little sister or the big brother and the little brother? You gotta figure those things out. Or do we try to make them both full size? I kind of feel like that would be a nice little one, and this is still a nice big one. Because if I'm gonna be swinging it, I kind of want the thin one. If I'm gonna be swinging it all the time, not the slightly thicker one, right? Just because it's just slightly more, right? So maybe if she's the short one, we could always swap handles around. You can do. Okay, so that's enough of those two. Uh, Moms and pops is granddad. Okay, so this one obviously is loose. It shakes, and it's literally moving all over the place, and there's no way to really save that. Uh, Once again, you could turn that into a short handle. You wouldn't want to do that for what we're going to be using it for. We need a handle this long, essentially, but his handle's got a check starting to crack. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it starts kind of down here and goes all the way up through here, and then kind of disappears for a little while, but then reappears right up and going into the head. Not a good thing, right? And if you look right at the end grain of the wood, you can see that those are the checks on top, but it's got checks coming in from the bottom too, and they're pretty big too, right? And they go down the other side. So it's like this handle is getting ready to split, getting ready to go bye-bye. So we want to get it out of there just so that we can save the shape and preserve that at least for a little while, so we can make another one at least. And then we have old granddad, which is actually like this is the one that's the closest to being okay. It's not terrible. It's got a little wiggle, like a tiny, tiny little wiggle in it, but it's usable. Like you'd be able to use this. You could like hammer that wedge a little bit further down in there and probably just retighten this up. So because it's like a granddad, you want to do that, but it's also kind of chewed up from overstrikes. It's like it's got a lot of character, a lot of old character, and you're like, what do you do? Do you hold on to that one? Do you not hold on to that one? Like, it's a tough decision, because you could soak the end in antifreeze. That's a trick from the chief. I'll tell you guys who the chief is after. uh, you put that in there, and it expands the wood again because it's the wood grain. The reason it's gotten loose is because the wood grain is dried out. But if you were to expand it with oil, let's say, it would expand again. But if you do it with antifreeze doesn't dry out. So then, it just stays there forever and it'll expand it. But it also makes it blue and kind of stinky. But, those are the things you deal with if you're trying to just tighten it up the old timer way, right? Put something on it that's going to fix the problem. But I have this handle too, and all the hardware, and it feels like it just like fits. It feels like it goes there. And so I'm kind of like, how can I argue with that? It almost even like matches it a little bit, like the old and the new. Like, so I think these are gonna be, that's what we're gonna be doing, right? And so then we'll just have to figure out what we're gonna do with the rest of these as far as handles. So handling is easy after we get to the point of actually doing things, because I've done this long enough now that I finally figured out how to make handles the easier way. Maybe we can try to figure that out together. But basically here, I have to cut all these off. And so the next step is to cut each of the handles off. I'm not actually going to do that on camera because this is a video. If I was live streaming, I might be able to like, tilt the camera and set it up so that, I'd be just doing the work in front of you guys. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the rest of the process. And the process is the simplest method that I know to take these from being like this and turn them back into usable, workable tools again. And it's from a collection of YouTubers that I've been watching for years that I've collected all this information from. And I can't, honestly, I can't name or remember all of them. But I'll give you the chief's name. Chief is Scout Crafter. If you're ever looking for more information on tools or old things that are cool, that's your guy. He's a he's a great guy, and he'll show you all the tips and tricks that you need to know. Like I'm just borrowing from the old masters, you know what I mean? But I still got the stuff here, so we can do it. So we'll have some fun. That's the whole thing, right? So, but so I'm going to cut them off. How am I going to cut them off? And how would I suggest you cut them off? Because, I might have different options available to me. And if somebody is like trying to do this for the first time, they have a hammer, you might have a hammer at home, you want to restore it, and you're like, how do I do this? How do I do it the old time way? Okay, so we're going to start. Okay, so you cut it off. You got to cut off the head because you got to punch out the rest of the gunk and the rest of the leftover pieces from where it was seated in there. So the way that you're going to do that is obviously with a saw. If you have a power saw and you know what you're doing, you don't need me to tell you anything. But if you're just starting out and you're young or you don't have many tools or you've never done anything like this before and you just picked up something at a thrift store or at a antique meet or antique shop or something like that, you saw, or even off of Facebook or your local trade meet swap type apps and stuff. If you have something like this and you want to restore it, you want to make it look better, I wouldn't suggest doing that if you're trying to sell it. That's more of a thing where like people want to fix it up themselves. So it's more if you're gonna take it and use it, or that's what you want to do because it's yours. You know what I mean? But if we're gonna cut these off, right? I've got a bunch of options. I've got 17, 20 different options that I could go with right now, each of them easy. And I've got like a Japanese pull saw that would be like super quick. But if you don't have a Japanese pull saw yet, you haven't bought any, you're gonna buy a tool to cut these off because this is your first job, first job that you're on. We're doing it the old time way. We're starting it from square one. This is your first job, so the first tool that you would need to buy in order to do this job without breaking it with your bare hands and fists and like smashing it on a rock or something to try and break it, you're gonna need a saw. This is the saw that I would recommend. It's a razor saw, which means it says thick kerf, but it's actually fairly thin for what this is, which means that it's going to have less resistance as the blade goes through. So you're going to be doing less pulling and pushing to try to get it through the material. And as you can see, the width of the blade is just enough that the back, the spine of it here isn't going to interfere with it. So we'll be able to cut through. This is not a saw that's necessarily designed for this type of work. Okay, this is just a saw that's convenient to have for all different types of things around the shop. Like when you're just trying to cut off something really quickly, like this is your, like, anybody could use this saw for anything, and it's not like intimidating, or it's like you're just slicing off a piece of bread. That's all this saw is, right? And I'm just going to move these slightly just for 1 second. I'll give you guys a little bit of a lesson on this saw with the piece of wood that we have right in front of us, right? This saw is made for cutting a piece of wood in this direction, like you're cutting it off in the two pieces, right? It is not necessarily a saw that is made for cutting a long piece of wood like this, because of that spine getting in the way, it's not going to plunge down into the material. So it's in just enough that you can like very accurately make a cut across a piece of wood in this direction. And that's why it's such a good saw, because it like holds itself really straight. So if you line yourself up with this saw on your line, you're going to get like a dead accurate cut, or you can train yourself really easily to get dead accurate cuts with a saw like this. Even though it's tiny, even though it's small, you can still work lumber that's a much larger size. You just have to take your time. That's all, right? So it's good for small jobs, good for medium jobs, not so great for large jobs. But that's if you're working in your shop, you want something small, medium, maybe large, right? It can do all. It can do all three. It can handle it. So this is the one. If you're gonna do by physical labor, that's your first saw. I'll just show you guys here again the packaging. It's a Zona, 18 teeth per inch, thick cut or thick curve dovetail razor saw. Okay, that's the one you want. There's a smaller one with 24-inch teeth or 24 teeth per inch. Uh, you want this one for just your general purpose. Just gonna throw that out there, right? And then once you cut them off, you're gonna need something to punch them out. Punches are something that you might be able to find at your local thrift store. These are some that were obviously destroyed. But they're great because it's kind of mushroomed out in a way where it gives me more ability to push things out, which is what I actually need to do, is to push everything out. So I don't mind these ones. These are kind of like bizarre custom punches that I have, but hey, they do the job. So even if you see stuff that's like that, sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes a broken tool or a bent tool is like the exact thing you need to do the job. So if you see sometimes you see bent and weird tools, you'll laugh, but those are the ones that you actually want to keep an eye out for, because it's like, hey, that might actually get me out of a jam. So just wanted to let you guys know that's first options as far as your saw, right? We're gonna cut those off. So that would be something that I would go and do after the stream. I'd cut these off and get that done. But I'm kind of lazy, and so what I'm probably gonna do is use this guy, which is a previous restoration that I did maybe like 2 years ago, something like that, with my mom, just having fun, cleaning it up and getting it ready again and relubing it and everything. So uh, I want to just do a little quick rundown of one of these, which is that if you came across one of these at a thrift store or something like that, or online, is it worth it to get one of these to do this type of work or to cut things, right? And I'm gonna say maybe, because it's not accurate. It kind of likes to wander. It's not perfect. Like this one is actually pretty good, but you can see like it has just a little bit of a jiggle right there. And that little bit of a jiggle makes it like it, in some senses, it like makes it easier to do curves. But in other senses, it's like it just wants to wander, and like you see how the blade kind of just a little bit of wiggle is all that it needs, and then it's just like wandering all over the place. So if we go back to our example of cutting a piece of wood like this accurately, it's not great because you try to get it on the line and it jumps all over the place, and you end up with like they call it chowdered or cut up, end of your wood, and then you got to fix that, and it's not really good. But in this case, we don't care. This is just rough cutting. We're just trying to trim these off. We're not trying to like break anything. So I can run a cut on each of these really quickly, because basically what it is, let me go back here. What it is that you want to punch this wedge that's wedged down into it back up again. So you need to cut it off and then punch that way. Maybe that'll help, or maybe you need to like punch half of it down and half of it up, or whatever is going to help loosen it up in there, because that's your only option. Like you can throw drill bits in there, but that's a piece of metal. I don't know if I want to throw a drill bit down there. I can end up on all kinds of problems if I do that. So it's better to just, trim it off and put it in something solid or on something solid that has a hole in it, and then try to bash that out. So that's going to be our approach for doing that. So you do need another hammer. You need a hammer to hit the hammers. I'm going to be using this one, which is my previous restoration. Nice piece of bloodwood in there. That's all that's holding that on there. And it's nice and solid, so it's a nice piece. But that's going to be how I'm going to do it. You might need to figure out how you're going to do that if you're working on this yourself first time, right? And so if this is also your first time, there's a couple other things you're going to need to know about as far as the old time way, which is what do you do? What do you do as the next step once you've got it off? right? Because you can tell that they're old, that they're rusted, and like, are you trying to save the rust? Are you trying to preserve it so it looks like it's old? Because you could decide to preserve it like it looks like it's old, and there's different steps that you could take to try to like even preserve the rust in certain ways so that it stays and looks better, blacken it or things like that, so that the tool looks like vintage and oiled and nice and proper. And you could go in that direction with these, or you could try to get rid of the rust and turn them back into bright, shiny, beautiful, brilliant objects again. But that also takes a lot of work. And so you got to question, how much work are you willing to put into these if you're going to try to do a job like this? And like, is there anything you can do to make your life easier? Because basically what it is like, what is even rust? Right? Does anybody know? Anybody want to take a guess? I don't know. I barely even understand it because all of my knowledge comes from just experience and like just testing and trial and error and looking stuff up online and like basically understanding things. But like my brain just doesn't like putting together certain types of symbols and math and stuff. So it's all in there from other directions, if that makes any sense. But we'll go back to what we're talking about. So rust. What is rust? Rust, is it a coating? Is it something that falls onto it? Is it something that grows out of it? Like how does that work, right? And it's kind of like it's a little bit of all, you know. Uh, it's the iron, as far as I know it, it's the iron reacting with the moisture in the air and turning into rust. And the rust that it turns into at first is red rust, which is why it has that kind of browny reddish tinge to it. And then as the rust stays in the air longer and longer and longer, it eventually turns to black rust because it goes through like another change where it like bonds with the oxygen in the air and changes once again somehow into black rust, or bonds with something else in the environment, maybe acid or base or something like that. I don't really understand. I just know that those are the three types of rust, and that's what we're going to be dealing with. And so it's stuck. It's kind of like it grows out of it, and it's stuck to the surface, and it's like a coating. So you could almost say that actually they're fine. They've got their rust coating. They're perfectly preserved. They're not going anywhere right now. So you wouldn't even have to do them. You could use these tools right now. You could just keep using them, except the wiggly ones, right? But so if it's a coating and it grows kind of out of it, like what are our options for removing it, right? And so the options are actually it's all basically physical removal. That's your quickest option, is to do something where you're going to either scrape or brush the rust off. And so your first two tools that you could ever take to something or that you ever need to consider, which direction do you go in for the next step of restoration, are actually these two. And I'll show you guys them. You've got your wire brush and your scraper, in this case, razor scraper blades. And you could sit here and just scrape all the rust off as best you could with the razor blade, or slowly scrape essentially with each of the bristles of the brush until you get rid of all the rust. The only problem with those two options is that it takes forever. And it's going to scratch up everything if you use something like that to scrape all of the rust off. I would do it. I'd still do it. I've done stuff like that before. It's not a problem. But you might want to do things like use the dull edge of the razor blade, not the sharp. You just use like the dull side, or you find yourself a brush like this one that has a semi-dull scraper on it, and you use that to scrape off the worst of it, right? So that's your like brute force method. If you had no other options and you were trying to do it, you could sit there for hours brushing it and it would come back to brand new essentially. But since we live in the 21st century and I don't exactly have time or energy to sit around just brushing things like for days on end, we're going to do the sped up process. And the sped up process actually happens in two other ways. And so we still need to do the brushing at some point, but we don't need to do it right now. We can do it electrically and we can save it as a final process so that we can have a brushed steel finish on the hammerheads so that they look nice, and it's we're only trying to do it at that stage to do it like to or at least to put as much of it there. We'll probably still have to brush them to get them clean, but it's like we're trying to not spend our entire day brushing each of these individually because that would take forever and my arms would fall off. So I don't want to do that. So what's our next options, right? We still need to brush at some point. We'll put that aside, right? These are the brushes. Actually, I've got one that we turn to a smaller brush. Talk about that. I'm going to be cutting off all the handles, basically. Here you go. This is one that I've like really used up. But if I cut it off somewhere like there, maybe, then I'd have a little short one, a little toothbrush, right? So that's what I'm going to do with that while I'm cutting things off today. Just an extra one on the docket, you know. Uh, but I'll put those aside for a second too. Let me just put those over there. Put those over there. Okay. So what other options do we have to make our lives easier? And the next options is chemical. And actually, it involves a series of baths. First an acid bath, then a base bath, then a rinse bath. You could do it with any acid, base, and rinse, which means that there's crazy people out there that try to do it with like super industrial strength acids that eat everything away really quickly. We're doing it the old time way, folks. We're doing it the easy way, the safe way, the way that moms and pops used to do it, the way that the kids can do it, and the way that old grandma and grandpa. So we're gonna use vinegar, we're gonna use baking soda, and we're gonna use soap. Right, that's gonna be our 3 bath method. Right, so once we've cut them off, once we've punched out the remaining, uh, each of them, it's all going to go into, I have tubs here. I have 3 like gray industrial washing tubs, and I'm going to set up each. This is off stream, right? If I was doing it on stream, I'd do it on stream and show you guys. But I'm going to set up 3 industrial washing tubs. The first one, 2 parts water to 1 part vinegar. The second one, I'm going to put in like, I don't know, a half a cup of baking soda and just swirl it around inside the water, warm water. And then the last tub is going to be cold water again, and it's going to be soapy. And I'm going to rinse them off in there, and then rinse them off with cold water. Put them on or towel them off. Put them on a tray and spray them with WD-40 just so that they can overwinter because I don't want to have to pay attention to them, and that'll keep them from kind of building up another rust again while we wait to do the handles in the spring. And so that's going to be the process. That's step 1, right, of the old time way, is to assess whether you want to do it physically. The old way, the oldest way, is just brute force, right? Or if you have time and you want to actually do it and you want to like make it easy on yourself, the old time way is to use a little bit of vinegar and elbow grease, and it actually helps us get through the process much quicker. So that's our first trick of the day, is the vinegar. I'm going to move this over here just so I can show you the other tricks that we have while we're working with the vinegar and the baking soda, right? Our cleaning options. Good stiff plastic bristle brush, which I know you're going like, well, we just had steel. Like, you think this is going to do anything? And it's like, once we get to the stage where the vinegar has actually worked on them, kind of like loosens up a lot of it, and you can just kind of brush off most of it. It's not going to be all of it, but most of it, right? So you need a stiff bristle brush that you don't mind. It's kind of like a sacrificial brush. It's only going to be used for this type of project. You're going to store it because you don't want to cross-contaminate everything, but that's going to be what that is for. You can also use Scotch-Brite pads to clean while it's in the baths, right? So you might want to cut this in half. The way that I would cut that in half is with a razor blade, so you don't cut it with scissors, don't cut it with shears or something like that, because you'll just dull them. But if you cut that with like an X-Acto knife, just make 2 pieces, then you have one for the acid bath and one for the base bath, and anything that's in there, you can make sure that everything gets scrubbed out. And then we also have, this is an option instead of steel wool, because steel wool is another thing that you could use to get like back to a finish. This is a barbecue scrubbing pad, so I don't mind sacrificing this in the water either. So basically these are just some cleaning options for when you get to the phase of doing the baths. And so that's essentially step one. We're going to do step one for today. And I'm going to maybe make some videos, shorts of just showing some of the process if I can. I'll have to figure out how to work that. But that is what our task is for today: is to cut them off, punch them out, and get them in the first bath. The first bath should be anywhere from 10 minutes. I like to do kind of 10 minutes and then check on it and kind of do an initial cleaning and then kind of check every 10, 20 minutes after that. And usually about after 2 hours or so, everything is looking kind of clean and, you know, like I could bring it out of there, and like scraping it back to like the little details might be the easiest way to do something. But we'll you just kind of play it by ear. You keep soaking it and scrubbing it until it's clean as you want to get it, and that's what we're gonna do. So, thank you for joining me for episode one of the Old Time Way, and hopefully you guys will continue to join me for more episodes, where we continue to discuss all the steps and different things that we are going to do along the way. But yeah, I just thought that this was a good place to start, the beginning, like back to basics, back to the originals, like the things that, like, where are you going to start? Where are you going to start? You got to rebuild humanity. Which direction are you guys going? Because these are all of them right here. I'm telling you, cleaning, restoring, making things good again, and all the tools that you need to go and do that. So let's see if we can figure it out together. So give me a like, give me a subscribe. I hope you guys like that, and we will continue. We'll come back at some point. We will put the handles on them, and I'll show you guys what these all look like when they're all beautiful. But this is we're just starting out. Every journey begins with a single footstep, right? So we gotta start somewhere. So all right, thanks guys. We'll see you next time, and have a good one. Cheers.